This is Angry Bob, the man with the industrial dick, coming at you loud and clear on WAR Radio. Rise and shine, folks. It's a beautiful day. Just look at that sky. It's a work of art. Ha! Nature never knew colors like that. And a friendly reminder, when you look at it, be sure to wear your shades. The radiation cloud's way up and the heat wave ain't expected to let up either. Weather control tell us it'll probably hit 110 downtown before nightfall. As for the good news, there is no fucking good news.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic strips and comic books that people have stopped talking about. This week we are talking about Hardware from 1990. I'm your host, Kumar. My co-host is Jordan. How are you doing, Jordan?
Hello, I am very well, thank you.
So I chose this one. Okay, there's a long story, which is that this movie, I haven't seen it, never seen it before, but it's been on my watch list for a very long time because I keep seeing it recommended over and over as this kind of weird, obscure kind of horror movie, science fiction movie. And we got to talk a lot about Richard Stanley, the director, as well. But it was always on the list as one to watch. And when I outputted that list of movies from IMDb, as I was scrolling through it a few weeks ago, more than a few weeks ago, I noticed that it was on there. I was like, oh, Hardware was based on a comic book? And I looked it up, and sure enough, it was based, quote unquote, on a story from 2000 AD called Shok, S-H-O-K exclamation mark.
Based? I mean, was it based?
No. Well,
is this contentious?
Yeah, it was contentious because he didn't ask for permission. He just made this movie, and then he got sued for plagiarism and lost. So at the very end of the current prints of the credits, you can see a credit in a different font, which credits Kevin O'Neill and who was it? Was it Sean McManus? Anyway, it says Rogan on. Yes, I'm looking at it. It says Rogan.
Steve McManus. Steve McManus. Kevin O'Neill.
And I don't know why he was using the code name Rogan. Anyway, Kevin O'Neill, of course, passed away 3 weeks ago. So when that happened, I was like, okay, I want to get Hardware on here as a way to talk about, an excuse to talk about Kevin O'Neill.
Fantastic.
Which I've been trying to do since episode 1 of the show. There's always somebody dies, and I'm like, how can we get this one in as fast as possible? And it never works. This is the first time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. So it was either this or a really horrible movie, which I haven't seen, but I'm ready to say it's horrible, called League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which we know all about. So those are the two Kevin O'Neill credits that we would be covering on this show, that we could possibly, potential topics for the show. So I decided it was time for Hardware. So we chose Hardware.
Fantastic. Brilliant choice.
Another interesting thing was that after we had chosen this episode, so the main theme song of the movie is performed by Public Image Limited. And, of course, Keith Levine, the guitar player, died 2 weeks ago. So we've got a double tribute. But, yeah, so it wasn't really based on – it was plagiarized. And it's very similar to the – interestingly, one thing I really love about this episode is all the little connections, because Terminator – went through a similar thing, right? Where James Cameron made this movie, and then in some interview somewhere on TV said, oh yeah, I just ripped off a couple of episodes of The Outer Limits written by Harlan Ellison. Ellison saw this interview, and he was like, you're going to court. And now his name is on every print of Terminator at the end. It says, based on the works of Harlan Ellison.
Demon with a Glass Hand, I think, is the episode of The Outer Limits. I've never seen it. I didn't know that James Cameron had actually bragged about adapting it from Ellison's work. You must never have heard of Ellison if you thought that was a good idea.
So
famously
Yeah.
cantankerous and argumentative science fiction.
Well, yeah, he's really about crediting the writer and pay the writer. That was like, he was like an advocate for that.
He was. That's true. There was a big thing about that because with City of the Edge of Forever,
yeah,
he wanted his name taken off it because he felt that they hadn't respected the original script that he'd written for it. And then it won a Hugo, or perhaps a Nebula. And there was a big kerfuffle about he wanted it to be credited to Corey Smith. Oh, no, that's not correct. He wanted it to be credited to some boilerplate name.
Okay.
This is a great digression, talking about Harlan Ellison.
Did you say Corey Smith? Did he? Corey Smith was a real person.
No. That's right. That's what I've got mixed up. It's something similar to that. A specific name that screenwriters would use to demonstrate that they weren't happy with the use to which their work had been put. They could ask to be credited by this bogus name, and he wanted to leave it on. And the producers of Star Trek, Bob Justman and Herb Solomon, had to kind of beg him to reconsider putting his own name back on.
He
gave the speech. Sorry, we're going way off topic.
I'm about to open another tab on this, on Cordwainer Smith.
All right. Oh,
so you go ahead. You finish.
No. I forbid you to talk about Cordwainer Smith. Kumar, sorry, we have to go back. Tell us about 2000 AD. Tell us about 2000 AD.
Oh, okay. So, well, the other thing, I wanted to draw some other connections before we kind of get to this. Well, it's getting ahead, but it's when Hardware comes. This 2000 AD story came out in 1981. Terminator comes out in 1984. Now, I bring up Terminator not because of the Harlan Ellison credit, but because it's almost the same as this Shok story by Kevin O'Neill and Steve McManus, where it's this unkillable, this killing machine, this robot that just, you blow it up a million times and it just keeps coming. And it also has heat vision, or it can detect heat. It doesn't need to have eyes. It can track your heat signature. So it's
that when we see from its point of view, it has that. Yeah, that very common. Although not only Terminator, it reminds me also of Westworld. You know, you have that kind of heads-up display which is reddish, and there'll be targeting reticles tracking across the screen and text and things like that. Yeah.
So then 1990, Hardware comes out, and it's accused by a lot of people of being a Terminator ripoff.
Right.
But really, it's a Shok ripoff.
It absolutely is. It's
a complete ripoff.
It absolutely is.
No, it was beat for beat ripoff of Shok, which we'll go into in great detail because it's only like 7 pages long, so we can talk about every page of it in a minute here. But my thing was, I was reading Shok, and I was like, well, Shok is almost the same as Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween as well. In fact, she's watching a horror movie on TV, and in Halloween, the characters are watching the Howard Hawks version of The Thing, which John Carpenter ended up directing the remake of himself a few years later. But the Shok story in 2008 is very similar to Halloween. And when James Cameron was making Terminator, he said it was based on Halloween. So
did he really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. He was doing a science fiction version of Halloween. So the Terminator was basically based on Michael Myers. So both Shok and Terminator are both based on Halloween. So I think they're as guilty. Well, not quite, but almost. They're darting their eyes around suspiciously around the room while people are accusing Hardware of plagiarism, I think.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, so this was it was actually a Judge Dredd spin-off story, because it's actually
it's in Mega City 1, isn't it?
I think is it Mega City 1 or 2? I can't remember, but so we've got this pilot.
It is Mega City 2, you're right.
It is Mega City 2, yeah. So we've got this pilot who's just arrived back in Mega City 2. I think he's a pilot, right? And this girl is being flirty with him. He's like, no, I gotta. Oh, we take off in a minute. Yeah, so he is a pilot. So he's like, whatever, But then he passes this Australian mutant junk dealer, who is his name is Tombstone Toothbrush, and he's selling knickknacks like mementos, which Judge Dredd supposedly picked up on his trip across the Cursed Earth in that very long storyline. And he has placed a special order with this guy, and this dealer, and the junk dealer has Death Valley robot remains, and he sells some to this pilot whose name is Mike. Okay, so Mike goes home to his girlfriend, Lynn.
Who is a sculptor.
She's a sculptor. She's a metal. She works with metal. She melts and welds metal into artworks. And she's got now these. He's brought home these robot parts, including one scary-looking robot head.
She knows exactly what it is. She says it's a shock trooper.
Yeah.
Shok.
Yeah.
SHOK with periods in between each letter.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. The heads make perfect soap holders, she says to him.
Yes. And he turns the bag over upside down and dumps all the stuff on the floor. You might think this is a pointless detail. That why am I mentioning this? I'm mentioning it because this is exactly what happens in the movie, note for note. And normally when we say, "Oh, they did this just like the comic," that's just what we expect. But this is a ripoff, so it's more interesting when he does something so exactly the same as turning the bag upside down and dumping all the bits onto the ground. Okay, so he has to. Okay, so they make out. Then he has to leave. He has to fly somewhere. Some flight is gone missing, and he has to go locate it. And he's like, this time, make sure you close the door, like lock it tight, because you keep forgetting.
The secure lock.
Secure
the door
lock.
was practically open when
the secure lock. Yeah.
Make sure the secure lock is closed.
So she bolts it like 5 times, so it's like really securely locked. And then she gets into the bath or some kind of spa thing. Kevin O'Neill has real trouble drawing alluring women. I will say he does a great job. Everything else, like this creature is a real Kevin O'Neill, weird, scary, ugly, grotesque robot thing that he draws so well, and all the action's so great. But when he's trying to draw beautiful women, she looks like some kind of weird elf thing or something. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so Alien. The bits have been vacuumed up into the vacuum cleaner bag.
Robot vacuum.
That's right, the robot vacuum cleaner.
Which is it's an upright vacuum cleaner with a bag behind it that talks. I think it has an eye on top.
Yes, it has some sort of sensor on top. Yep, and it speaks.
Like all the robots in Judge Dredd, it talks kind of like in colloquial, like folksy colloquialisms. It talks like a regular person, like a regular character.
Yeah. Okay, but meanwhile, in the bag of this vacuum cleaner, the creature, the shock trooper, has been reassembling itself, and then it rips itself out of the bag and it attacks Lynn in her home, where she's locked in with the thing.
It says free.
It says free, and it says shock. It doesn't say much else. I don't remember if it does. But anyway,
actually, no. It's got quite a few lines.
Oh, it does. You're right.
It talks quite a bit.
Yeah.
And the vacuum cleaner says to it, "You naughty rubbish, get back inside this minute."
Yes. All right. Now Lynn is watching The Thing from Another World on TV. No, she's watching a horror movie on TV, in Halloween. And then the monster, which is just a robot, it's only down to the torso. It's the head and the torso and the arms. It doesn't have legs. It attacks her just because it's a programmed war bot, I guess.
Not sure. Is it Shock Trooper? It might be an established thing in Judge Dredd.
Right. Okay, maybe. Point, I don't know.
But I don't know.
Okay, that could be.
But it doesn't matter. It's evil and it wants to shock to kill.
Yeah. So now she's trying to get out of her house, but she's basically locked herself in because she's put all the locks on there. Meanwhile, the shock trooper is powering itself from her power box, her apartment's power box.
That's right. That causes the lock to fail.
Yeah.
Because it's an electronic lock and the thing is draining the power.
Yes, that causes the lock to fail. So she can't get out. She's locked in because this thing has drained the power. Now it's got more juice. And she tries to jump out the window, but they're waiting at the window and it attacks her. And she manages to smash one of her metalwork acid against it. She has a brief moment of relief when she bashes it with this acid. It burns out its eyes, but it has heat. It can detect body heat, so it follows her that way. She's running around calling for help. People outside are just like, don't talk to strangers. Like, they can't tell what's going on. They're just like, oh, this is a crazy city. Ignore it. She's screaming.
Judge Dredd.
Yep. She attacks him with one of her artworks, which is a great little moment that I loved. She's got like this really spiky piece that she's created, and she fights back against it. It's very like Laurie Strode jabbing Michael Myers, like with the coat hanger and stuff. And she works out that it's detecting her body heat. She's like smart enough to do that, which is another thing I like, which is also very like Laurie Strode. Then the final page of the story, she opens the freezer door super wide so it's confused, and then she
and it's literally got a question mark.
Yeah,
in a thought bubble above its head.
Yeah, and then she uses a laser carver from the kitchen. I love it. It's just like Halloween. She uses all the household objects to fight this thing.
Yeah.
And it's got severe damage. And then that's the end. That's the last panel. She says, "Killed it." It's the same panel where she's smashing it. She's saying, "Killed it," and it's short-circuiting. Then we get 4 panels of epilogue where Mike comes home and he says, "You and back home at last." And Lynn is sitting on the sofa. Her back is turned to us. And he walks up to her and he says, "Your little wombat's home, darling." I don't know why he says wombat. Maybe he's Australian too, like the junk dealer. Anyway, he says, "Come on, darling, give Mikey Pooh a kiss and makeup." And Lynn turns around and it's actually the shock trooper wearing a wig. And he says, "Yes, Michael, I'll give you a kiss, the kiss of death."
The end.
End. Yeah.
So a very kind of horror movie ending there.
Yeah, we don't know where it got the wig from. It's very like the ending of Troll 2. Like, you don't know how it works. How are they still alive? Or
like Carrie coming out of the grave at the end of Carrie. There's no reason for her to do that. She just does. There's no reason for it to be still alive. Why is it wearing her hair?
Yeah. How did that happen?
It doesn't matter. It's still there, and it's gonna get him now. Typical horror movie ending.
Yeah.
As you say, very much running on horror movie tropes all the way through. Yeah, the parallels to Halloween are very apparent.
Yeah. But how did you feel about it?
I liked it well enough.
Yeah.
It's a acceptable little story.
Yeah.
Nothing about it really thrilled me. It didn't fill me with thrill power.
Yeah. I should mention it first appeared in Judge Dredd Annual 1981. And the whole thing, it can be read online at 2080.org, which is probably not a legal site to read 2080 stories, but I can't find any place that it's been reprinted. Maybe it was once. Yeah, I'm looking here. It's been reprinted once in an issue of Judge Dredd. But like everything about this story, there's illegalities and ripping offs and stuff going on.
This is the least. We're pure as the driven snow compared to some people in this story. This is the least of the copyright infringements that you're going to hear about. So I was just shocked by how similar it was to Halloween the whole way through. But I really loved Kevin O'Neill's monster design of this creature. It's really pure Kev O'Neill, which is, that's what we came for. That's what we wanted. And I was shocked by how much it presaged Terminator and Predator with the torso. It's just the torso of the robot, which happens at the end of Terminator, right? When he gets chopped in half and he's still coming after them. I was like, this is so like Terminator. And then the heat vision comes on. I'm like, this is so like Predator. And but I think its downfall is Kevin O'Neill trying to draw women at that time. Obviously by the Mina Harker days, he was fine. But here, like, there's a panel where when the thing first attacks her and she's watching TV, she turns around and screams, and it's the most ridiculous looking drawing of her face saying E, and she just looks like he was using he found a Barbie doll somewhere and was just kind of copying the face. I don't know what was going on there. But later on, when she picks up her sculpture to stab the the shock trooper with. Her head looks like it's twisted at a right angle.
Yeah.
She's saying no, but her lips are just pursed.
Yeah.
And she looks like she's broken her neck.
Yeah, and then on the previous page when she smashes it with the acid, she's looking up at the ceiling in weirdly distracted way, like he found a mannequin and laid it down and drew that. Yeah. And
I remember, yes, that struck me when I first read it.
Yeah.
It's just, what is she doing? Is she trying to avoid getting acid in her eyes? What exactly am I looking at here? It's really weird.
But
as you say, isn't that curious? How you're right. There are parallels with Terminator there. I mean, it's an implacable machine, isn't it?
Yeah, she keeps blowing it up. It keeps coming. It's only half a machine. It's just crawling around on its arms after her, which is what happens through the end of Terminator. Yeah,
that's right. Although it does say goofy lines.
Yes,
which is very typical for 2000. I was going to ask you to explain to the listeners what's the deal with 2000 AD for people that might not have heard of it.
Okay. It's a British anthology comic that started in the late 70s. It's printed on newsprint. It's rather larger size, like a magazine size, like I guess is normal for UK comics. But it basically emerged out of a bunch of guys who were sick of doing kids comics. We're like, let's do something better. And they kind of teamed up and they found some investors and they launched this magazine called 2000 AD, which was it was science fiction oriented. It was a bit more like heavy metal, like Metal Hurlant, but like a British version. Very political and cynical and violent and all the things you want as a teenager rather than as a little kid. And even as a little kid that you would want to hide from your parents and read. It was really like cool, edgy science fiction stories.
It's quite different. Yes. It's quite different from kind of like mainstream superhero comics, isn't it?
Well, it would have been quite different from the Beano. I think the Beano would have been the thing that they were trying to like get away from. Like, I'm sick of working on these gag cartoons for little kids.
And just about every British comics author has worked on 2000 AD at some point or another.
And Kevin O'Neill was the one that got their names in the credits. He started out as I'm happy to talk about this because I love Kevin O'Neill. I was really actually very sad when he died 3 weeks ago. So Kevin O'Neill, before 2000 AD, writers and artists wouldn't get their names in the credits. Comics just were born out of like quantum fluctuations in the universe. So the publishers didn't want you to know who was writing or drawing these things. They just came into existence. Kevin O'Neill started out as a paste-up guy, so he was like doing corrections and maybe lettering or some bits and like stuff like that, like not actual artwork. And finally worked his way up. When he got into 2000 AD, one of the things as he was doing the same job there, he started insisting that we get names for the credits for the writers and artists. Without that, the British invasion that happened in the US in the mid-80s probably might not have happened because the US publishers wouldn't have known the names of the people writing and drawing these comic books.
Excellent.
So when they were like, we need someone to take over Swamp Thing, and they were looking in the UK for someone, and they picked up they hired Alan Moore at that time, out of his work on 2000 AD and Warrior. That was thanks to, largely, I think a huge part was thanks to Kevin making sure that his name was in the credits. Oh, by the way, I got this thing.
When we mentioned Alan Moore.
and another thing. So I've been reading about a few months ago, Alan Moore's short story collection came out called Illuminations. And I'm a couple hundred pages into it. And there's 9 short stories in here. Now, I use the word short stories advisedly because the feature story is called What We Can Know About Thunderman, which is a story about the comics industry. And it's 250 pages long. But it is actually dedicated to Kevin O'Neill. So this is that story.
It's more of an essay, isn't it? Or quite a long essay.
Yeah, it's so that one is it was before he passed away. You know, it would have been a few months ago that he maybe put that on there.
But brilliant. But the tone of sorry to return to 2000 AD.
Sure.
As you were saying, it tends to be, it's quite different from mainstream superhero comics. It's quite, as you say, it's quite British, isn't it? It tends to be cynical, political, ironic, and violent.
Yeah.
And also it's not too earnest. I mean, it doesn't take itself too seriously all the time.
Yes.
So as we pointed out, like the robots say silly things, like the robot vacuum cleaner it says the kiss of death, and it says things like the shock trooper says, "I love to shock," or "I like to shock."
Yeah.
And it's chasing her around the house, and you know, like the robot. She asks the robot vacuum cleaner to help her, and it says, I'm not rated for night work," or something like that.
Yeah. We should mention that Kevin O'Neill co-wrote this as well. He didn't just draw it. So.
Did he indeed? Okay.
Yes.
Wow. It's really something.
Yeah.
Since you pointed out that the parallels, not just with hardware, which we're going to talk about any minute now.
Yep.
But also with those other films from the 80s, with the heat vision, tricking the heat vision like in Predator.
Yeah.
The implacable robot. He doesn't know fear. He can't be reasoned with, and he's crawling around as just a torso.
Yeah.
This is the strip that spawned 1,000 films. It feels like. Yeah,
it ripped off Halloween and created Terminator and Predator.
Of course. Well, ultimately we have to start with Halloween, I suppose. But that's what a fascinating little piece of history we've stumbled across this week.
Yeah.
It's really excellent.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move to the movie Hardware from 1990. Right. So this is directed by Richard Stanley. He is a South African director. Hardware was his first movie. He made two other movies, which I haven't seen, called Dust Devil and Brave. And then in 1996, he had a very notorious thing, which is that he was hired to direct The Island of Dr. Moreau, the one with Val Kilmer and
Marlon
Brando, Fairuza Balk, all those people were in it. And he was fired from that. And John Frankenheimer took over. And there's a whole documentary about that called, what was it
Famous
called?
Trouble Production.
Yeah, very famous. But he was fired from that. And then he wrote a bunch of movies for a long time, but didn't direct again until 2019 when he directed the very excellent The Color Out of Space, starring Nicolas Cage, which is a movie I absolutely love. But
based on the Lovecraft story. Ring the bell for Lovecraft, please. There we go.
Yeah. I knew we were going to mention Lovecraft and Alan Moore today. That's why I put that on my phone. So that's a really great movie, and it was really great to see him come back because he really hadn't. It had been more than 20 years since the debacle on Dr. Moreau, right. And he really deserved better. And the only other thing I saw him in was he was one of the talking heads in the Jodorowsky's Dune documentary.
Yeah, of course he was.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got this movie. It's starts with some desert shots, really red, like radioactive desert shots. There's a guy wandering through the west. It's beautiful shots. I was like, how did he even make this? Apparently, it was shot in Morocco.
That's right, Morocco.
Those bits anyway. And we got this guy wearing all the kind of hazard gear, picking up rubble or debris in the desert. And he's picking up
around in the sand.
We see a robot hand kind of moving under the sand, and this guy picks up some bits. Then we're in the city, and the city it's like the far future. Everything's kind of awful. It's kind of a dystopia. It's overcrowded, disease.
It's the post-apocalypse, isn't it?
Post-apocalypse, yes. So we know that the desert was red because it was a radioactive wasteland. We know because it was all the gear he was wearing and stuff. And this guy named Mo, or Mo, short for Moses, and his friend who's called Shades because he wears sunglasses all the time, show up at this dealer trying to sell him some junk. And while that guy's out of the room, this guy comes in out of the desert who we saw in the opening scene, and they offer to buy his gear from him before this other dealer, Alvy, who I don't remember his name, but he was in Willow, that actor.
He played Burglecut, the town mayor.
Yeah,
obnoxious character. In this, I'm pretty certain his voice is being ADR'd.
Okay. Yeah.
Because in Willow he does not sound like that. So
right.
In this film he has quite a gravelly, deep voice, and in Willow he doesn't sound like that.
Right. Okay. So right. So they try to make a deal with this guy before Alvy can make a deal.
Incidentally, some of the first shots in this film, fantastic.
Yeah.
This guy, Alvy's junk dealership is down the end of a corridor, kind of like an arched brick corridor, like a tunnel.
Yeah.
And when this junk dealer, who has no lines, I think,
does.
Does he?
He does when he comes in, because he has a kind of Australian accent, maybe.
Does he? Okay, great. Well, that's brilliant, just like in the comic.
Yeah.
But there's a shot of him walking down the tunnel, and he's in silhouette, but they've managed to get a light source to shine off the glasses he's wearing.
Yeah.
So you can just see some pinpoints of light in the middle of his face as he walks down the tunnel, and it looks fantastic.
Yeah. All that stuff is really well set up, because our only locations are basically Alvy's shop and the apartment building, and even the apartment room.
But there are others, aren't there? It's just like some street sets.
Yeah, there's some street sets, but it's pretty contained, and I think he was able to really focus on the light, like making that desert look so red, all that kind of stuff. And those little pinpoints of light on the glasses of the junk, the scavenger. So yeah, there's
a lot of great lighting. Absolutely.
So he buys this robot skull that the scavengers picked up.
Overpays for it.
Yeah, he pays for it. Yeah.
He overpays. He overpays the dealer. The wanderer, as he's called in the credits. Right. He overpays him for it because he wants it for his girl.
Yeah.
And Alvy offers him, I think, a fraction of what he paid for it.
Yes.
And he says, it doesn't matter because I just want to make her happy.
Yes, and I think it's a Christmas present for her.
That's right. It's coming up to Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah. So he buys a skull, which looks very much like the Kevin O'Neill design initially. There was something about it that I was like, oh, it really kind of looks like it. He takes it to her. Now she's been having to deal with somebody ringing the video doorbell and not answering. Like she's got a prank caller or a obscene caller. It's not quite established, but she's in this in an apartment. She lets Moses in when he rings, but she hasn't seen him in a long time, so things are a little bit strained between them. There's an interesting moment of awkwardness with Shades, because Shades says he's been checking on her. It doesn't go anywhere, but he says he's been checking on her, and then she's like, "Oh, hi, Shades." Like maybe something's been going on there.
There's a lot of stuff that doesn't go anywhere.
Well, it kind of comes back. We do get another shot later on when they start making out. Shades kind of awkwardly backs himself out of the apartment and leaves the apartment, but the camera makes sure to keep him in shot the whole time.
Weird. I don't think it really pays off.
I think it must be.
Well, we're supposed to think that he's the stalker.
No, maybe, or maybe
that's what I thought.
Or maybe we're supposed to have a motivation for him to come back to help her once the thing goes berserk, beyond him being his friend's girlfriend, sometimes girlfriend, like he actually has a thing with her or something. I don't know, but perhaps. We can get into it.
It's not. I feel. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So, by the way, they get there in a cab driven by Lemmy, and meanwhile we're listening to radio.
It's a water taxi.
A radio station which is hosted by Iggy Pop.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah.
Iggy Pop's. So we don't see Iggy Pop, but we hear him, and he just. There's a lot of. Okay. I'm gonna. So to digress from our discussion of the plot, sure. I want to talk about one of the things. What I love about this. I really love the first half of this movie, especially.
Yeah.
Loved it. the setting is the greatest thing about this movie. The desert in Morocco, it's great. It's clearly a nuclear like wasteland.
Yeah.
I think Richard Stanley said that he was inspired partly by Damnation Alley, the Roger Zelazny novel. Yeah. And I think you can see that with we have a lot of shots of the sky and clouds, like an orange sky, orange clouds. And like it feels so lived in and grimy. Everything's grimy and disgusting. We get a lot of close-ups of people's mouths.
Yep.
Lit with green and like strange colored lights and sweat.
Yeah.
We get like when Lemmy drives them to the apartment in his water taxi, there's all this scum floating on the water, bubbles and things.
Yeah.
And Iggy Pop does some great scene setting, because he says, oh, it's me, Angry Bob. And, and look outside and look at that sky. Haven't you ever seen such beautiful colors like that? You don't see colors like that in nature.
Yeah.
And he talks about how the population board is trying to get people to have fewer children. And go on and line up and get your sterilization.
Yes, there's a population control bill coming in, which is an important plot point. Yeah.
It feels very 2000 AD because that's the kind of thing that's happening in 2000 AD all the time.
Yeah.
Some announcement about the latest effort to, the involuntary vasectomy bill, or there's always just wacky stuff going on, wacky, extreme, ironic stuff.
Yeah.
And the voiceover at a radio broadcast to set the scene, set the tone. I feel that's something that happens quite a bit in comics, often on the very first page. I'm thinking of Halo Jones.
Yeah, absolutely.
In Halo Jones, there's something very similar, a radio announcement where it's just kind of like setting the scene, and also in another underrated work which I was reading the other week called Weird Crime Theatre, which I believe also begins with radio broadcasts on its first panel. So a story tradition in comics and in films adapted from comics.
Yeah.
Kumar, who was the author of Weird Crime Theatre?
It was yours truly. And it was a long time ago. But absolutely, it's a great shortcut. And Frank Miller did it with TV broadcasts all the time in Dark Knight Returns, especially. It was very effective. So
a really great lived-in film that feels like a 2000, like a Judge Dredd comic.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah. So now we get this. We get a very long sex scene. It starts in the shower, and then it goes to the bed. And I'm like, wow, do we really need two? We need two locations for this. Actually, it all paid off. I was surprised. We needed the establishment of the shower, and we needed the establishing of the voyeur looking at them. So I think it was
a close up on his mouth again as he just.
Yeah, so there's voyeur across
as he's taking photos.
Yeah, he's looking at them through a telescope and taking photos of her all the time.
This is her stalker. He says all these deeply unpleasant things.
Yeah. Very. Yeah, he's
really grotesque.
He's pretty
completely sleazy. And then later on, he also calls her up. He does an unwelcome call where he just talks all this filth.
Yeah, like he pretends to be Moses for a minute. He tries to trick her. Okay, so we'll get to that. So Shades goes home and gets super high on something and worships a painting of Kali. And he's okay. And then that's what Shades is doing. Fine. She watches TV. Another thing, a moment I love is she turns on her TV and Guar is on there. But the music that's playing is not Guar. The music is Stigmata by Ministry, which I thought was great.
Only you would know this.
It's a great little moment. Anyway, so meanwhile, Alvy starts researching this robot because he's kept the hand of it or something. And he starts researching. He finds out it's this experimental military robot. And he calls up Moses at the apartment. He's like, you got to come over here and we got to talk about this thing and bring the head back with you. He's like, I'm not going to do that. Now, for some reason, while she's asleep, he reads his Bible. Something about what Alvy said causes him to pull out his Bible and read this.
He tells him it's a Mark 13.
Yeah.
And that inspires him. He mentions the name of the robot. So the robot is called the Mark 13.
Right.
This I think is a little bit clever. Alvy calls him up. He doesn't tell him that the robot's dangerous. Right. This is a misunderstanding I've seen, I think, online in a synopsis of the film.
Okay.
It's often misunderstand what's going on here. They think Alvy's calling him up to warn him about the robot, but he's not.
No.
He sees it as a money-making opportunity. Yeah. So that's why he doesn't tell him any details over the phone, because he wants him to come back and then they can bang out a deal where they can profit from it. And he mentions the name Mark 13. And as you say, Mo doesn't take the skull, but the head, but he does get out his Bible and he reads a passage from it, and it's Mark 13.
Okay, now I get it. Yeah, I didn't know what was going on. Okay.
Yeah, and that's where no flesh will be spared, which I think is the tagline of the film, is a line from that.
Oh, my favorite tagline was "You can't stop progress."
That's a more 2000 AD kind of one.
Yeah.
And then there's this weird religious stuff running through it as well, which I don't like as much. Like with the Kali thing on the wall.
Yeah.
Shades meditating. People are meditating a lot. It's not just Shades, but also the girl, Jill.
Yeah.
She's meditating when we're first introduced to her, and then later on there's some religious 2001 style kind of like religious imagery that goes on when some characters pass away, and that is a bit weird. I didn't like that as much as I like the ironic stuff.
I think maybe we'll come. Okay, so because the robot injects you with a hallucinogenic when it kills you, and when Moses gets stabbed with this stuff, he goes through this whole hallucinogenic sequence. I didn't really understand why it was necessarily in the movie, except to put in some really cool images into it, I guess.
Yeah.
So he leaves, and I can't remember. I might be getting the order wrong. By the way, the skull wakes up and its eye lights up with this red dot, just like Terminator. So you can see why people were like, this is a Terminator ripoff, because it looks just like it, and especially in those.
It does look just like Tim.
But she's, of course, a metalwork artist.
It has red eyes.
So she paints it with the colors of the American flag, which I loved. I thought that was a weird, funny choice. So maybe she was doing that while he was asleep. There was a weird sequence where always one of them was awake and one was asleep, and then they switched, and then the other would be awake and the other would be asleep. Anyway, she smokes these Major Good Vibes cigarettes. The brand is called Major Good Vibes.
Marijuana.
Yeah, which I thought was a very 2000 AD kind of. Even the drawing of the Major on the box was like, this is like a 2000 AD kind of thing.
And one of the ads on the television is radiation reindeer steaks.
Yes, yes, yeah. There's a bit of
like paranoia.
RoboCop in there. There's some RoboCop in there as well, I think. But so this is about a 90-minute movie, 95 minutes, but the thing only reassembles itself at minute 43. I noted that. But it's not like we're like, when is the thing going to start attacking? But it does take some time to. There's a lot of table setting before we get to this thing.
It's funny. I really liked as I think I said earlier. I liked the table setting. In fact, more I think than the eventual action. For reasons that we'll get into.
Yeah. So the voyeur across the street sees that she's alone and comes over. He says he's the guy that installed the locks on the doors and stuff, and he'll I think they get locked in somehow, and he's like, I'll get us out. But he doesn't know about the robot, doesn't believe. She's like, there's the killer robot in here. He's like, what are you talking about? It kills him.
He's extremely sleazy.
Yeah.
He's
Meanwhile, Moses,
he's like a stalker essentially.
Oh, yeah.
She made him coffee once 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And he's been obsessed with her ever since. Apparently to the degree of moving into a nearby apartment near her.
Right.
He's taken, like hundreds of photos. His walls are covered in photos.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I can sort of see. I think I sort of understand what the Richard Stanley was going for here. Like, is he the threat? Is he our threat? But we've already seen the robot at this point.
Yeah.
And the robot just murders him, and I think we're all meant to be very happy that he was murdered by the robot because he's a thoroughly revolting.
He's the first one to die. Yes. Yeah. So meanwhile, Moses has gone to Alvy's shop, and Alvy's been killed by the hand of the robot, the dismembered hand.
Injected him with the poison.
Yeah.
The hallucinogenic
and
poison.
now Moses knows that what's her name? Lynn? No, Lynn was in the comic. But he knows she's in trouble. Jill. Yeah, played by Stacey Travis. By the way, she mentioned Moses is played by Dylan McDermott, who is kind of a big TV star these days, but maybe this is pretty early for him, I guess.
I think, yes, he was, originally I think this film was going to have a lot more of a British cast.
Right.
But apparently when it was picked up for distribution by Miramax, the producers insisted that it have more American elements, specifically in the casting of 2 American leads. Okay. And do you know who the co-executive producers were for this film?
Of course, it's Bob and Harvey Weinstein.
It absolutely was Bob and Weinstein.
I can tell you hundreds of stories about hundreds of horror movies that were fiddled with by them, usually for the worse. But anyway, so it's the Weinsteins and Miramax.
It amused me that the sleazy pervert stalker's name was Lincoln Weinberg.
You know what? There's a whole sequence in Scream 3 about this producer that has been sleeping with actresses. And the casting couch. It is a whole subplot of that movie, and they're talking about it constantly. And I'm like, what is going on here? This is a Miramax movie. This was produced by Harvey Weinstein.
How did that ever get past?
Yeah, I really don't. It was shocking. Maybe Richard Stanley.
I think it's just a coincidence, but it is funny. I mean, he even looks a bit like Harvey Weinstein. He's heavy set. Yeah. Grotesque. Bestubbled. I was thinking, that's pretty funny.
Yeah. So we get that. So the maintenance guys in the building are these 2 black guys that play chess, and the older guy mentions that a computer can't win at chess because it doesn't know about sacrifice. So that's kind of
that's how you beat a robot. Yeah. It says you can beat a robot with this
some special move. Technique. Yeah.
Which he calls the Sicilian opening, or something along those lines. It's probably a real chess move. He says that you can always beat a computer with it because a computer doesn't understand sacrifice.
Right.
So presumably it involves sacrificing a piece for a checkmate.
Yeah. Okay, so Moses rounds up a gang to come back and help Jill, and there's a huge. This is not like the comic because we get a huge gang in there trying to beat this robot, and they blow it up and they blow it out the window. Of course, it's still not dead. It comes back. Jill flies at the window. She gets electrocuted, and we think she's dead. It drains the power from the apartment, just like in the comic.
Yes, trapping her because she has It's established early on that she considers herself very safe, aside from her stalker harassing her. She considers herself very safe in her apartment because it's completely self-contained and she never leaves.
Yeah. So at this moment, she figures that the population control bill is actually the Mark 13. It's
they suss it out. It's part of enforcing it, or something along those lines. It's not. We're supposed to think it's a soldier, but it does weird things. It kills with a poison instead of just killing.
Yeah.
It inflicts terror, like it does, like the shock trooper in the comic. It does things to frighten and shock, and it's a terror weapon. Yeah. It's designed by them, the powers that be, to terrify people into compliance with the population laws, which are designed, incidentally, to limit the number of mutants born, because it's established that a lot of mutants are being born because of radiation damage.
Right.
Supposedly, Burglecut was one such mutant, which is not very politically correct.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Actually, yeah. No, they do talk about how he's a mutant, and I really hate it when little people are in fantasy or apocalypse movies and they're little people because of the mutation or there's some other species, as opposed to just being little people. But it's so consistent.
Really fly these days.
Yeah.
Although I understand that we're getting a Willow remake.
TV series.
A TV series, correct. Coming out November 30th.
Yeah.
So we'll see how they handle the.
Well, he'll still be.
Nelwyn's?
He won't be. Yeah. That's a species. It's not. They're not just short people. They're a species anyway. So Mo gets killed by the robot.
The toxin. He's injected with the toxin.
So he has hallucinations. Then
he slits his wrists
for some reason, and he sees stigmata in his hands, and then he sees cockroaches crawling out of the wounds, and has all sorts of visions.
He has visions. It's starting to get weird here. We're having some orchestral music. The monster, the Mark 13 it looks cool. It's lit from behind, and it looks like it's conducting. It's waving its arms around.
Yeah.
It looks like it's conducting the orchestra.
Yeah.
And the film's starting to get pretty weird at this point.
It's getting weird. I have to say though, something we haven't mentioned is I like that the robot seems really solid and hard to break. It seems like it's made of very thick iron or something that's very hard to smash.
She wails on it with a baseball bat, and it gets shot. It doesn't affect it. It gets hit with a baseball bat. It doesn't affect it.
Yeah.
The only thing that affects it, of course, is coming up.
Oh yeah.
We've had foreshadowing.
So first she logs into her computer and is able to tap into the thing's brain to try to communicate with it somehow.
No foreshadowing to that being a possibility, and it's just got its hand in the power outlet. It does this constantly. It'll shove its hand in something, and then there'll be a squib and a crashing cord, and it's draining power. And I think Richard Stanley thinks this is a lot more interesting and dramatic than it actually is, because I got pretty tired of these squibs going off every few minutes. But it's draining power, which it apparently needs to do constantly, I guess, because it doesn't have any batteries or anything. It's always draining power.
Yeah.
And she goes to her computer, which also operates the front door. Yeah. She starts tapping away, and she hacks into it.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah, and she kind of communicates with it, and it speaks in the voices of other things other characters have already said in the movie.
A cool touch, but there's just not enough foreshadowing. It's too randomly.
It is random, but also
great. It says things that it's heard.
Yes, but has it heard those things? It hasn't heard Why does it tell her that its weakness is moisture, or that its shielding isn't complete, or something? It says like the shielding is faulty or something. Why does it tell her?
Well, that was mentioned. It's Moses knows it, right?
I think Alvy
said it, and Moses hears it. He hears it when he goes back.
Okay.
Because Moses takes audio notes. Okay. It's playing on repeat on a tape. So right. Mo hears it.
Okay.
And then I wasn't sure. I didn't know what was going on here either. I thought maybe I didn't know what was happening. Had Moses transferred himself to the robot?
This is a real robot? Yeah, I had real so this is the sacrifice, right? The chess move. He had to sacrifice himself, I'm guessing. Thematically, it doesn't really add up.
But he didn't sacrifice anything. He was dead anyway.
He was dead, yeah.
I went online trying to suss this out in the 5 minutes between when I finished watching the film and when we started recording this podcast. And online it said he mutters it when he's hallucinating as he lays dying. But I didn't hear that. I didn't hear him mutter it.
I heard him say it at some stage.
It had definitely been mentioned twice already. There was foreshadowing.
Yeah.
When Alice, the junk trader, He says it when he's Alvy. That's it. He says it when he's first going through his files, when he's first Googling it, and then it's mentioned again when Mo goes back and hears his notes playing. There's a lot of exposition going on in this film, but it's handled pretty well a lot of the time. Like it's fine. The guy took audio notes.
Yeah.
He had a tape deck, and it was playing when he went back and found the guy dead.
Okay.
But then that whole bit where she hacks into it, and then come on, it corners her in the shower, and then she turns on the shower by accident.
Yes.
You know, that doesn't even matter. That was frustrating. You need something like when Linda Hamilton goes, "You're terminated, fucker," and she crushes it with the press in Terminator. It needed something like that, but she just turns on the water by accident.
So she does the thing with the freezer door, like she opens it up to confuse the robot.
Just like in the comic.
That's straight out of the comic, note for note. Out of the comic, she opens the freezer door or the fridge door to confuse it. And then the shower gets turned on by accident, which is a bummer because she's heard it tell it what its weakness is. It says, for some stupid reason, it tells her that its weakness is its shielding or whatever. And she remembers, and she hears the conversation about the rain for some reason. It's repeated the conversation, which I couldn't have heard this stuff about the rain unless he mumbled it in his hallucinations. Oh, yeah, you're right. It was there. And its eye was turned on. You're right. So it was recording all that stuff. You're absolutely right. So she turns it on. There wasn't
enough setup for it. I think I understand what he was trying to do because it gets a bit spiritual towards the end. So it's his, as you said, it's his sacrifice foreshadowed with that line about the chess, which has unlocked its weakness. But it just happens there's no cause and effect. It just, there's no chain of causation. There's no explanation as to why his sacrifice leads to that information being revealed. Yeah. And then even when the information's revealed, it has no effect because it's an accident that it corners her in the shower, and then it's an accident that she needs to trick it into the shower.
Yeah,
in the same way she tricked it with the fridge. Very unsatisfying.
It is, and it's kind of it's in the comics. She picks up her own like artworks and stabs it with, which is
she welds it a bit. She uses her welding gear to attack it a bit.
Yes, she does. She
doesn't use the acid.
I will say though that I did. Even despite this stuff happening by accident, I did love that she was on the offensive at the end. And this is actually pre-Terminator 2, which is another. I was thinking about Terminator 2 and Linda Hamilton because James Cameron did the same thing twice. He did with Aliens and Terminator 2, where he took the female character from the first one.
Passive character and made her active, yeah.
I would not call Ripley passive in the first one, but he made her a kind of machine gunner. Now she carries a machine gun. It's the same in both these sequels, right? But I did feel like this, again, was kind of like, she was acting like Sarah Connor in T2 in this. It's almost like obviously, Aliens was before this, but I can see it was just another connection for me that I kind of saw this through line of all these five movies connecting to each other. Yeah. Well,
she crashed through that window in the downstairs, and then she insists on going back up. This is when it seems like, Mo's already cut his wrists for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And she's running back upstairs with the maintenance men or the security guards or whatever they are, their baseball bat. And they're trying to convince her not to go back in there, but she's just going straight back in there. She wants to save Mo. And then one of the security guys gets bisected by the door.
Yeah, that's crazy. Really gory. Because you think it's over. It seems like he's going to make it.
It should have been over at that point.
And then they open it again. He kind of makes him more through. Then it crashes on him again. And then it just lingers as it smashes him
right in half.
Yeah.
Yeah, blood everywhere. Yeah, but not a satisfying denouement because, it dies from water, the way we've been told it was going to die from water.
Yeah.
And then it just shorts out and dies.
Yeah.
And then we have Iggy Pop saying, "Hey, it's Angry Bob," and Good news! The government is going to begin production on a new cyborg soldier called Mark 13, and there'll be 800 jobs in it for all of you plebs. So get on down to the assembly line and sign up. And then that's the end of the film. It's some lingering shots of the blasted sky.
Yep. Okay.
So, thoughts? Kumar, did you like the film?
Let's go through our yays or nays. Let's do the comic first.
Oh, okay. Yays or nays? Yeah. Okay.
So,
all right.
Comic, yay or nay?
Kumar, is this comic? Comic, yay. Even if now you've utterly convinced me that it's a yay, I think you need to read this comic now to understand the history of suspense, horror, and action films of the 1980s.
Yeah.
I think this is a piece of history now, as far as I'm concerned. So yes, please read the comic.
Yeah, I think it's
Come on,
really
tweet
great.
the link to this illegal website where you're absolutely not allowed to read it.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes even.
Yeah,
I really did dig the comic, but more just all of Kevin O'Neill's stuff. I did an episode of Deconstructing Comics on Nemesis, the Warlock, that'll be out maybe around the same time this is out. I don't know when that's coming out, but God, that was a great read too. And League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, of course, and Martial Law, and those Green Lantern stories, which everyone will talk about, especially the one that the Comics Code rejected, based purely on the art style. He didn't violate any of the rules of the code. They were just like, this is too gross, and they rejected it. And DC, to their credit, published it anyway without the code on it. This comic is a yay. I mean, it's a medium yay, but Kevin O'Neill, as big as it gets in terms of yays. Okay. The movie, yay or nay? Yay,
especially for the first half.
Yeah.
Especially for this, for the world building, for some of the crazy stuff that's going on in the background.
Yeah.
That Iggy Pop, Lemmy the water taxi driver.
Yeah.
It's absolutely worth tuning in.
And Guar and Ministry and all that stuff. And
yeah.
It's
I think it's really great. Yep, go on.
Yeah, I was very glad to finally get around to it after all these years. Definitely feel like Richard Stanley should have had a more successful career.
Well, extraordinary bloke. He was 20 when he made this film.
Jesus. Wow, I did not know that. Okay.
Just extraordinary. Really extraordinary. He'd just been filming documentaries in Afghanistan, where apparently he'd been hanging out with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, the anti-Soviet.
Yeah.
And from that to making this film, and there was probably some influences there.
I think that the Dr. Moreau thing just kind of it sidetracked.
That seems to have sidetracked a lot of people's careers, not just his. It's such a shame.
No, I don't know.
Or maybe Val Kilmer.
That was all right. That was still doing okay, I think.
I suppose. It's such a bad movie. But it's the drama behind the camera that's really interesting. It's worth watching.
But and again, if hopefully we get more like Color Out of Space, because that was just so great. Adaptation. This is a curious one because it was very cheekily adapted.
This is a layered question. So, I mean, it was, as you say, a wholesale kind of like lifting.
Yeah.
Apparently they felt, there was no citation for this where I read this, but apparently he just thought changing the names would be enough.
Right.
Apparently.
It feels that way. It feels like that he thought that would be enough.
Yeah, whereas it very clearly was not enough. Obviously it is so, but it should be, from the way I've been talking about the things that I liked about the film, I think it's clear that I consider this a great adaptation of a 2000 AD. It's almost like a film of a 2000 AD comic. Yeah. It's much more like Judge Dredd than either of the Judge Dredd movies, the good one or the bad one.
Right. I think
like
you're right.
The tone is perfect, especially the first half, before it gets weird with the spiritual stuff. But it perfect kind of tone for an adaptation of a 2000 AD prog, as is the word I believe they use for issues.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. I think if it had been a legitimate adaptation and you went into cinema knowing that this was based on Shok, I don't think you'd be disappointed. I think the ending, I mean, as soon as the gang shows up, that's something that's on the comic, and that's where everything kind of shifts in the movie as well. But as far if you're gonna adapt a 7-page story into a 90-minute movie, I think this is the way to go.
The way to do it?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I think we've got another 6 yays, which is the first time since Persepolis, maybe. Persepolis was the only other Excellent. 6 yays, I think.
Oh, great. That's good. Well, to finish up, I read an interview with Richard Stanley that was published in 2009 on a website called Quietus. And he downplayed the comparison with 2000 AD.
Oh, okay.
Understandably,
sure.
because he went to court.
Of course.
Because he went to court saying that he hadn't based it on a 2000 AD comic. So the line he ran with in this interview was that, say rather that both myself and the writers of 2000 AD were inspired by the same sources. They were working with the same inspiration.
What was the source where the woman was a metal worker?
Yeah, obviously we can't.
And the Australian scavenger. What? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he protests too much in this interview. But I just thought you might be interested in what he listed as what he thought were the common inspirations for 2000 AD and for his film. Okay. So first of all, what I already mentioned, Damnation Alley by Zelazny, which is, if you haven't read it, classic, kind of like post-apocalyptic novel. Wonderful kind of Zelazny word painting, endless descriptions of a blasted sky, black lightning, crazy things like rocks raining from the sky, the sea being drawn up through tornadoes and strewn across the land, and the center of America being an utter waste and an impassable wasteland. Instead of Tornado Alley, it's called Damnation Alley. And I believe that Damnation Alley inspired the Cursed Earth storyline, the original big storyline in Judge Dredd, which was mentioned by name in the Shok comic.
Yeah.
The other inspiration he mentioned was Philip K. Dick. Not much more to say about that. Philip K. Dick, amazing science fiction author.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But so those were the. So he made a kind of like a desperate claim to being co-equal.
But this is like saying you land on another planet and there's gangsters because they had parallel evolution to Earth. Like, I don't really buy it.
I don't buy it either, but I just thought it'd be interesting to mention those books.
Yeah. Okay. So next week, I think it'll be obvious why we're going to do Batman Mask of the Phantasm. And it's the most, so far, maybe the most inappropriate for the podcast in terms of it being too obvious. Like, I mean, it's not like nobody's talking about Mask of the Phantasm anymore, or have forgotten that it was based on a comic book or whatever.
It's in the title.
Yeah. So, but Kevin Conroy passed away 2 weeks ago, and it's like this. This whole podcast is an excuse for me to watch. I wanted to watch Hardware for 20 years and never got around to it, and I finally got around to it. And I want to talk about Kevin Conroy, and this is my excuse to do it. And it's kind of, I guess, in a sense, maybe one of the more obscure Batman adaptations in terms of, if you were to say name the Batman movies, it would be pretty far down on the list.
That's why you're doing the podcast, Kumar. But I think the question to end on is, why am I doing the podcast?
Yeah, I don't know. So you can watch the stuff I tell you to watch, and read the books I tell you to read. I think that's why you're doing it. So the comic to read, I guess, is going to be Batman Year 2. I think that's maybe the closest thing there is to Mask of the Phantasm, as far as I can tell. I don't think they're going to be very close, and it's going to be weird. Actually, this is it's kind of good we're getting to it early, because we're going to have situations where we have a Batman movie or a Superman movie, and are like, which comics do we read, and how do we do the yay or nay on adaptation at the end? Because it's not going to be an adaptation. It's going to be two things that exist in the same, that are in the same toy box. Yeah.
We'll use that very uncertainty to scaffold a fruitful intellectual discussion.
Okay.
I mean, we've made it quite plain from the start that we thrive on inconsistency.
Yes, absolutely. If nobody's listening to this show, we can do whatever we want. Is right. My take on it.
That's right. Brilliant.